Your Magic the Gathering news report is brought to you in part by the channel MTG Anarchy, where we take a look into the world of Magic the Gathering and throw a little bit of mischief and chaos into the mix.
Welcome to your Magic the Gathering news report, spoiler edition. My name's Michael, it's great to see you here. On today's report, we're going to be covering the spoilers that happened over the weekend from April 3rd to April 5th of 2020. And I just want to go ahead and let you guys know something up front with these.
Due to there being too many cards being spoiled as of April 3rd, I am not going to go ahead and give my opinions on these cards. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what they are and what they do, kind of in an audio-esque format. And if there is something that does stand out, then I may stop and talk about it, but those are going to be just for a couple cards. There are also going to be cards that are going to be released in different languages, so I will try my best to go ahead and let you know what those cards are, as well as what they do, more towards the end of the video. But for now, let's just jump right into the spoilers for Ikoria Lair of Behemoths as of April 3rd of 2020. First up is Brokos, Apex of Forever. This legendary Nightmare Beast Elemental costs 2 colorless, a green, black, and blue to cast, or you can mutate it in for 2 colorless, a black-blue hybrid, and 2 green mana. It has a power and toughness of 6/6, it has trample, and you may cast Brokos, Apex of Forever, from your graveyard using its mutate ability. Next up is Kogla, the Titan Ape. This legendary ape costs 3 colorless and 3 green mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 7/6, and does the following. When Kogla, the Titan Ape, enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Whenever Kogla attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. For 1 colorless and a green, return target human you control to its owner's hand. Kogla gains indestructible until end of turn. Our next instant is Mythos of Nethral. Now this instant costs 2 colorless and a black to cast, and does the following. Destroy target non-land permanent if it's a creature, or if green-white was spent to cast the spell. Next up, we have the creature Saval Sabertooth. Now this cat costs 1 colorless and a white to cast, and has a power and toughness of a 3/1. Our next creature is Wingfold Petron. This dinosaur costs 5 colorless and a blue to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/6, and does the following. Wingfold Petron enters the battlefield with your choice of a flying counter or a hexproof counter on it. A creature with hexproof can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Our next instant is Channeled Force. This instant costs 2 colorless, a blue, and a red mana to cast, and does the following. As an additional cost to cast the spell, discard X cards. Target player draws X cards. Channeled Force deals X damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Our next creature is Skull Prophet. This human druid costs a black and a green to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/1, and does the following. If you tap it, you could add black or green mana, or if you tap it, you can put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Our next card is Primal Empathy. This enchantment costs a colorless, a green, and a blue to cast, and does the following. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. If you control a creature with the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Our next creature is Labyrinth Raptor. This nightmare dinosaur costs a black and a red to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/2, and does the following. First up, this creature has Menace. Then, whenever a creature you control with Menace becomes blocked, defending player sacrifices a creature blocking it. And if you pay a black and a red mana, creatures you control with Menace get +1/+0 until end of turn. Our next card is Colossification. This enchantment aura costs 5 colorless and 2 green to cast, and does the following. First up, enchant creature. Then, when Colossification enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Then, enchanted creature gets +20/+20. So we're actually going to talk about this one. Wizards just went ahead and did the unthinkable. They're giving a creature +20/+20. That is insane, that is ridiculous, and I'm glad the casting cost is that freaking high, because what the heck, Wizards? This is insane. This is pretty much a one-shot for Commander. Legitimately, this is one shot. So I'm glad you allowed the creature to go ahead and get tapped, but yeah, no, this is insane. This is an insane card. Our next card is Blood Curdle. This instant costs 3 colorless and a black to cast, and does the following. Destroy target creature, put a menace counter on a creature you control. It can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. Next up, we have Shredded Sails. Now this instant costs 1 colorless and a red to cast, and does the following. Choose one. Destroy target artifact, Spreaded Sails deals 4 damage to target creature with flying, and you could cycle for 2. Next up, we have Back for More. This instant costs 4 colorless, a black, and a green to cast, and does the following. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. When you do, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Each deals damage equal to its power to the other creature. Next up, we have Voracious Great Shark. This creature shark costs 3 colorless and 2 blue to cast, has a power and toughness of 5/4, has flash, and whenever Voracious Great Shark enters the battlefield, counter target artifact or creature spell. Next up, we have Auspicious Starix. This elk beast costs 4 colorless and a green to cast, or you can mutate it for 5 colorless and a green. It has a power and toughness of 6/6, and whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanent cards, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. We're gonna talk about this one. So you know how I said that the last card, the one that gives things +20/+20 was insane? This just took it to a whole new level. Basically, Wizards gave green a free cast mechanic, and that should not have happened. One bit. Should not have happened to the slightest, but they did it. And honestly, to me, I hope this gets banned like they did with the Otter. I really do, but I doubt it, because green is a favorite of Wizards. So, honestly, play the heck out of this card, because this is just insane. Our next card is General's Enforcer. This human soldier costs a white and a black to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/3, and does the following. Legendary humans you control have indestructible, and if you paid 2 colorless, a white and a black, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Next up, we have Archipelagor. This Leviathan costs 5 colorless and 2 blue to cast, or you can mutate it for 5 colorless and a blue. It has a power and toughness of 7/7, and whenever this creature mutates, tap up to X target creatures, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap step. Next up, we have Death's Oasis. This enchantment costs a white, black, and green to cast, and does the following. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then return a creature card with lesser converted mana cost than the creature that died from your graveyard to your hand. Also, if you pay 1 and sacrifice Death's Oasis, you gain life equal to the greatest converted mana cost among creatures you control. Next up, we have Rogran Crystal. This artifact costs 3 colorless mana, and if you tap it, you can add a blue, red, or white mana to your mana pool. Also, it has cycling for 2, so if you pay 2 and discard this card, draw a card. Next up, we have Enditha Crystal. This artifact costs 3 colorless, and if you tap, you can add white, black, or green mana, plus it has cycling for 2. Next up, we have Ketria Crystal. This artifact costs 3 colorless, and you can tap it to add green, blue, or red mana, or you could cycle it for 2. Our next card is Zagoth Crystal. This artifact costs 3 colorless, and you can tap for black, green, or blue mana, plus it has cycling for 2. Our next card is Saval Crystal. This artifact costs 3 colorless, and you can tap it for red, white, or black mana, and it has cycling for 2. Our next card is Call of the Death Dweller. This sorcery costs 2 colorless and a black to cast, and does the following. Return up to 2 target creature cards with total converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a Death Touch counter on either of them, then put a Menace counter on either of them. Our next creature is Glowstone Recluse. You can cast this spider for 2 colorless and a green, or you can mutate it in for 3 colorless and a green. It has a power and toughness of 2/3, it has reach, and whenever this creature mutates, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Next up, we have Cheville, Bane of Monsters. This legendary human rogue costs a black and a green to cast, has a power and toughness of 1/3, has death touch, and does the following. At the beginning of your upkeep, if your opponents control no permanents with bounty counters on them, put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. Next, we have Trumpeting Gnar. This beast costs a colorless, a green, and a blue to cast, or you can mutate it for 3 colorless and 2 hybrid green-blue mana, has a power and toughness of 3/3, and whenever this creature mutates, create a 3/3 green beast creature token.
Next up, we have Reconnaissance Mission. This enchantment costs 2 colorless and 2 blue to cast, and does the following. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. You may also cycle this for 2. Next, we have Mythos of Snapdax. This sorcery costs 2 colorless and 2 white, and does the following. Each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, then sacrifices the rest. If black-red was spent to cast the spell, you choose the permanents for each player instead. Let's actually talk about this one for a second. I think white needed another card like this. It is technically a Wrath effect, but for all players, and yes, you're going to be able to choose which ones as long as you're playing in like aristocratic sort of ways, the black-red sort of combination with white. Edgar Markov is going to be a good way to go with this, but yeah, no, this is actually really awesome, so yeah, I like it. I think this is going to be a fun card to play in any sort of format. Next up, we have Proud Wild Bonder. This human warrior costs 2 colorless and 2 hybrid red-green mana, has a power and toughness of 4/3, has trample, and creatures you control with trample you may have this creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. Next up, we have Dreamtail Heron. This elemental bird costs 4 colorless and a blue mana to cast, or you can mutate it for 3 colorless and a blue. It has a power and toughness of 3/4, flying, and whenever this creature mutates, draw a card. Our next card is Dire Tactics. This instant costs a white and a black mana to cast, and exile target creature. If you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. Next up, we have Flourishing Fox. This fox costs 1 white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 1/1. Whenever you cycle another card, put a +1/+1 counter on Flourishing Fox, and you can cycle for 1. Next up is Mythos of Vadrok. Now this sorcery costs 2 colorless and 2 red to cast, and does the following. Mythos of Vadrok deals 5 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. If white-blue was spent to cast this spell, until your next turn, those permanents can't attack or block, and their activate abilities can't be activated. The next creature is Cavern Whisperer. Now this nightmare costs 4 colorless and a black to cast, or you can mutate it for 3 colorless and a black, has a power and toughness of 4/4, it has menace, and whenever this creature mutates, each opponent discards a card. Our next creature is Fiend Artisan. This nightmare costs 2 hybrid black-green mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 1/1, and does the following. Fiend Artisan gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. If you pay X and a hybrid black-green and tap it, and sacrifice another creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. Okay, we're gonna have to pause for a minute and talk about this card. So from my understanding, as long as you pay X and either a black or a green, and you sacrifice a creature, and tap this, you can search your library for any type of creature out there and put it onto the battlefield. Okay, this isn't necessarily free casting, but this is a really powerful effect. What is going on with green-esque like cards? Especially for this, because all the cards that we've stopped for were green, had green in them. So Wizards is playing favoritism towards green, especially for something that should not be done in green. But let's move on. Our next creature card is Braneth Magistrate. This human wizard costs a colorless and a white to cast, has a power and toughness of 1/3, and your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. Our next creature is Fertilid. This elemental costs 2 colorless and a green to cast, has a power and toughness of 0/0, and does the following. Fertilid enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. If you pay 1 and green, remove a +1/+1 counter from Fertilid. Target player searches their library for a basic land card, puts it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffles their library. Our next legendary creature is Yidaro Wandering Monster. Now this legendary dinosaur turtle costs 5 colorless and 2 red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 8/8, has trample and haste, has cycling for 1 colorless and 1 red mana, and when you cycle Yidaro Wandering Monster, shuffle it into your library from your graveyard. If you've cycled a card named Yidaro Wandering Monster 4 or more times this game, put it onto the battlefield from your graveyard instead. Next up is Insatiable Hemophage. Now this creature nightmare costs 3 colorless and a black to cast, or you can mutate it for 2 colorless and a black. It has a power and toughness of 3/3, Death Touch, and whenever this creature mutates, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Our next creature is Dirge Bat. Now, this bat costs 2 colorless and 2 black mana to cast, or you can cast it for its mutate cost for 4 colorless and 2 black mana. It has a power and toughness of 3/3, flash, flying, and whenever this creature mutates, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Next up is Migration Path. This sorcery costs 3 colorless and a green to cast, and you can search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. It also has cycling for 2. Our next card is Valiant Rescuer. This human soldier costs 1 colorless and 1 white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/1, and whenever you cycle another card for the first time each turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. And you can cycle this for 2. Next up is Nethroi, Apex of Death. This legendary cat nightmare beast costs 2 colorless, a white, a black, and a green mana to cast, or you can mutate it for 4 colorless, a hybrid green-white mana, and 2 black mana. It has a power and toughness of 5/5, has Death Touch and Lifelink, and whenever this creature mutates, return any number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Next up is Everquill Phoenix. This Phoenix costs 2 colorless and 2 red mana to cast, or you can pay 3 colorless and a red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 4/4, has flying, and whenever this creature mutates, create a red artifact token named Feather, with 1, sacrifice Feather, return target Phoenix card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Our next creature revealed is Phase Dolphin. This elemental whale costs 2 colorless and a blue to cast, has a power and toughness of 1/4, and whenever Phase Dolphin attacks, another target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. Our next card revealed is Boon of the Wishgiver. Now this sorcery costs 4 colorless and 2 blue mana to cast. You can draw 4 cards, or you could cycle it for 1. Next up, we're revealing legendary creature General Kudro of Drannith. Now this legendary human soldier costs 1 colorless, a white, and a black mana to cast. It has power and toughness of 3/3, and does the following. Other humans you control get +1/+1. Whenever General Kudro of Drannith or another human enters the battlefield under your control, exile a target card from an opponent's graveyard. If you pay 2, sacrifice 2 humans, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. The next creature revealed is Chittering Harvester. Now this nightmare costs 5 colorless and a black mana to cast, or you can cast it for its mutate cost, which is 4 colorless and a black. It has a power and toughness of 4/6, and whenever this creature mutates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Next we have Neutralize. This instant costs a colorless and 2 blue mana to cast, and does the following. Counter target spell, or you can cycle it for 2. Our next creature revealed is Riel the Everwised. This legendary human wizard costs 1 colorless, a blue, and a red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 0/3, and does the following. Riel the Everwise gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards.
Our next card is Shark Typhoon. This enchantment costs 5 colorless and a blue, and does the following. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Or you can cycle this for X, 1 colorless and a blue. Also, when you cycle Shark Typhoon, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. Our next creature is Stormwild Caprador. This bird goat costs 2 colorless and a white, has a power and toughness of 1/3, has flying, and does the following. If non-combat damage would be dealt to Stormwild Caprador, prevent that damage. Put a +1/+1 counter on Stormwild Caprador for each 1 damage prevented this way. Our next creature is Pouncing Shore Shark. Now this shark beast costs 4 colorless and a blue to cast, or you can mutate it for 3 colorless and a blue. It has a power and toughness of 4/3, it has flash, and whenever this creature mutates, you may return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. Our next card up is Footfall Crater. Now this enchantment aura costs 1 red mana to cast, and does the following. Enchant land. Enchanted land has tap, target creature gains trample and haste until end of turn, and cycling for 1. Our next creature up is Thieving Otter. Now this otter has a casting cost of 2 colorless and a blue to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/2, and whenever Thieving Otter deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. Our next card up is Mythos of Brokos. Now, this card costs 2 green to cast, it's a sorcery, and if blue-black was used to cast the spell, search your library for a card and put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. Also, return up to 2 permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Our next legendary creature is Abosh the Burrower. Now, this legendary Helion horror costs 3 colorless and 2 hybrid black-red mana to cast. It also has companion, so each non-land card in your starting deck must have an odd converted mana cost, and whenever a source you control with an odd converted mana cost deals any damage, double that damage instead. Next up is Barrier Breach. Now, this instant costs 2 colorless and a green to cast, and you can exile up to 3 target enchantments, and it has cycling for 2. Our next sorcery is Mass Extinction. Now, this sorcery costs 3 colorless and a black to cast, and you can choose odd or even. Exile all the creatures with a converted mana cost of the chosen trait. Our next sorcery, we have Devouring Bite. Now, it costs 2 colorless and a green to cast, and as an additional cost, reveal a creature card from your hand, but Devouring Bite deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the revealed card's power. Our next creature up is Quartz Forest Crusher. This dinosaur beast costs 2 colorless, a red, and a green to cast, has a power and toughness of 6/6, has trample, and whenever one or more creatures you control with trample deal combat damage to a player, create an XX green dinosaur beast token with trample, where X is the damage dealt to that player. Our next card up is Wilt. Now, this instant costs 1 colorless and a green to cast, and does the following. You could either destroy target artifact or enchantment, or you could cycle it for 2. Our next sorcery is Monstrous Path. It has a casting cost of 4 colorless and a green, and can do the following. Target creature gets +7/+7 until end of turn. Target creature must block if able to this turn, and it has cycling for 2. The next instant revealed is Tiger's Will. Now, it costs 1 colorless and a white to cast, but target creature gains +2/+2 until end of turn. If it's blocking, instead of put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can cycle it for 2. Our next sorcery is Indestructible Link. This costs 4 colorless and a black to cast, but you can return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. Our next instant up is Keep Safe. For 1 colorless and a blue, you can counter target spell that targets a permanent you control and draw a card. Our next instant up is Clash of Titans. Now, it costs 3 colorless and 2 red mana to cast, but if you do so, target creature fights another target creature. Each deals damage equal to its power to the other. The next card up is Giant Moth Cocoon. This creature egg costs 1 colorless to cast, it has a power and toughness of 0/2, and whenever this creature mutates, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Our next artifact creature up is Crystal Giant. This giant costs 3 to cast, but at the beginning of your turn's combat, randomly choose one of the counters that aren't on Crystal Giant. Put a counter of that type on Crystal Giant. Our next enchantment is Bastion of Remembrance. Now, it costs 2 colorless and a black to cast, but when Bastion of Remembrance enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Our next card up is Curious Herd. Now, this instant does cost 3 colorless and a green to cast, but you can choose target opponent. You create X 3/3 green beast creature tokens, where X is the number of artifacts that player controls. Alright, our next card is a Johnny Unyielding. It does cost 4 colorless, a green, and a white to cast. It has a loyalty of 4 and does the following. If you +2, reveal the top 3 cards of your library. Put all non-land permanent cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. If you -2, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. If you -9, put 5 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, and 5 loyalty counters on each other planeswalker you control. The next card up is Obscuring Haze. This instant costs 2 colorless and a green to cast, and if you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. Our next card up is Nesting Grounds. This land, you could tap it to add colorless mana, or if you pay 1 and tap it, you can move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. The next card up is Tayam Luminous Enigma. This legendary Nightmare Beast costs a colorless, a white, a black, and a green mana to cast. It has a power and toughness of 3/3, but does the following. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. For 2, remove 3 counters from among creatures you control. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Our next card up is Netherborn Aether. Now this artifact costs a colorless and a black to cast, but if you tap it, you can put a soul counter on Netherborn Aether. Put your commander into your hand from the command zone. Then you lose 3 life for each soul counter on Netherborn Aether. The next card up is Lifecaster's Bestiary. This artifact costs 3 to cast, but at the beginning of your upkeep you can scry 1, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay green. If you do, draw a card. Our next creature up is Boneyard Microdrax. This fungus costs 2 colorless mana and a black mana to cast. Its power and its toughness are equal to the number of other creature cards in your graveyard, and you can scavenge this for 4 colorless and a black, which if you pay 4 to black, exile this card from your graveyard, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to this card's power on target creature. Scavenge only as a sorcery. Our next creature card up is Mind Leecher. This nightmare costs 4 colorless and 2 black mana to cast, or you can mutate it for 4 colorless and a black mana. It has a power and toughness of 5/5. It has flying, and whenever this creature mutates, exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. Our next card revealed is Sanctuary Blade. Now this artifact equipment costs 2 colorless to cast, but as Sanctuary Blade becomes attached to a creature, choose a color. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has protection from the last chosen color. You can also equip it for 3. Next up we have Molten Echoes. This enchantment costs 2 colorless and 2 red mana to cast. As Molten Echoes enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Our next instant up is Flawless Maneuver. Now it does cost 2 colorless and a white to cast, but if you control a commander, you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Our next creature card up is Alicia, who smiles at death. This legendary human warrior costs 2 colorless and a red to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/2, has first strike, and whenever Alicia, who smiles at death, attacks, you may pay either a hybrid white or black mana twice. If you do, return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. Our next enchantment revealed is Shared Animosity. It does cost 2 colorless and a red to cast it, but whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. Next up we have Shiny Impetus. This enchantment order costs 2 colorless and a red to cast. It allows you to enchant a creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and it has goaded. It attacks each combat if able and attacks a player other than you if able. And whenever enchanted creature attacks, you create a treasure token. It's an artifact with tapped, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color. Our next creature is Kelsian the Plague. Now this legendary human assassin costs a red, white, and black mana to cast. It has a power and toughness of 2/2, has vigilance and haste. Kelsian the Plague gets +1/+1 for each experience counter you have, and if you tap it, Kelsian deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control. When that creature dies this turn, you get an experience counter. Next up, we have Zexara, the Exemplary. This legendary Nightmare Hydra costs 1 colorless, a black, green, and blue mana to cast. It has a power and toughness of 2/3, it has Death Touch. You can tap it to add 2 mana of any 1 color, and whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token, then put X +1/+1 counters on it. Next up we have Brawlin Skyshark Rider. This legendary human shaman costs 3 colorless and a red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/3, partners with Shabraz the Sky Shark, and whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Brawlin Skyshark Rider, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. If you pay 1, target shark gains trample until end of turn. Next up we have Shabraz the Sky Shark. This legendary shark bird costs 3 colorless, a white, and a blue mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/3, it partners with Brawlin Sky Shark Rider, has flying, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Shabraz, the Sky Shark, and you gain 1 life. If you pay a hybrid white or blue mana, target human gains flying until the end of turn. Next, we have Ravenous Gigantotherium. This beast costs 5 colorless and 2 green mana to cast. It has a power and toughness of 3/3, has dredge for 3, and when this creature enters the battlefield, it deals X damage divided as you choose among up to X target creatures, where X is its power. Each of those creatures deals damage equal to its power to this creature. Next we have Nascent Metamorph. This shapeshifter costs a colorless and a blue to cast. It has a power and toughness of 1/1, and whenever Nascent Metamorph attacks or blocks, target opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. Nascent Metamorph becomes a copy of that card until end of turn. Then that player puts all cards revealed this way on the bottom of their library in a random order. Next we have Decoy Gambit. This instant costs 2 colorless and a blue to cast, and for each opponent, choose up to 1 target creature that player controls. Then return that creature to its owner's hand, unless its controller has you draw a card. Next, we have Khazur, Ruthless Stalker. This legendary human warrior costs 3 colorless and a green to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/3. It partners with Ukima, Stalking Shadow, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Next, we have Ukima, Stalking Shadow. This legendary whale wolf costs a colorless, a blue, and a black to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/2, is partnered with Khazur, Ruthless Stalker, and Ukima, Stalking Shadow can be blocked. When Ukima leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player, and you gain X life, where X is its power. Next up, we have Aeon Frolicker. This elemental otter costs 2 colorless and 2 blue mana to cast, has power and toughness of 5/5, has flying, and when Aeon Frolicker enters the battlefield, if you cast it, a target opponent takes an extra turn after this one. Until your next turn, you and planeswalkers you control gain protection from that player. Next up, we have Silent Arbiter. This creature artifact construct costs 4 colorless mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 1/5, no more than 1 creature can attack each combat, and no more than 1 creature can block each combat. Our next creature is Masked Admirers. Now, it is an elf shaman that costs 2 colorless and 2 green mana to cast. It has a power and toughness of 3/2. When Masked Admirers enters the battlefield, draw a card, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay 2 green mana. If you do, return Masked Admirers from your graveyard to your hand. Our next sorcery is Deadly Tempest. Now it costs 4 colorless and 2 black mana to cast, but you can destroy all creatures. Each player loses life equal to the number of creatures they controlled that were destroyed this way. Next up is Jace, Architect of Thought. It costs 2 colorless and 2 blue mana cast, has 4 loyalty counters, and I cannot read any of the +1s or -2s or -8s, so if you want to look this card up, go ahead and do so on your own time. Next up, we have the sorcery Villainous Wealth. It does cost X, black, green, and blue to cast, but target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of spells with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. Next up, we have Martial Impetus. Now, this enchantment aura costs 2 colorless and a white to cast, but you can enchant a creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and is goaded, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, each other creature that's attacking one of your opponents gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Next up, we have Verge Rangers. Now, this human scout costs 2 colorless and a white to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/3, has first strike. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and as long as an opponent controls more lands than you may play lands from the top of your library. Next up, we have Species Specialist. This human warrior costs 2 colorless and 2 black mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/3, and does the following. As Species Specialist enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature of the chosen type dies, you may draw a card. Next up, we have Nahiri the Harbinger. This legendary planeswalker costs 2 colorless, a red, and a white mana cast, has a loyalty of 4, and has the following things. If you +2, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. If you -2, exile target enchantment, tapped artifact, or tapped creature. And if you -8, search your library for an artifact or creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. It gains haste, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. Next up, Psychic Impetus. This enchantment aura costs 2 colorless and a blue to cast, but if you enchant a creature, Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and is goaded, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, you scry 2. Our next creature is Agitator Ant. Now this insect costs 2 colorless and a red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/2, and at the beginning of your end step, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. Goad each creatures that have counters put on them this way. Our next creature up is Daring Fiendbonder. This human warlock costs 3 colorless and a black mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 5/1, has haste. Daring Fiendbonder attacks each combat if able, and if you pay a colorless and a black mana, exile Daring Fiendbonder from your graveyard. Put an indestructible counter on target creature. Activate this ability only at any time you can cast a sorcery. Our next creature revealed is Glade Muse. This beast costs 2 colorless and a green mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/4, and whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, that player draws a card. Our next card is Manascape Refractor. This artifact costs 3 colorless mana to cast. It enters the battlefield tapped. It has all activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to pay the activation costs of Manascape Refractor's abilities. The next card revealed is Predatory Impetus. This enchantment aura costs 4 colorless and a green mana to cast. You can enchant a creature, and the enchanted creature gets +3/+3, must be blocked if able, and is goaded. Our next card revealed is Selective Adaptation. This sorcery costs 4 colorless and 2 green mana to cast, and does the following. Reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Choose from among them a card with flying, a card with first strike, and so on for double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, and vigilance. Put one of the chosen cards onto the battlefield, the other chosen cards into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Our next card is Halden, Avid Arcanist. This legendary human wizard costs 2 colorless and a blue mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 1/4, has partner with Peiko, Arcane Retriever, and you may play non-creature cards from exile with fetch counters on them if you exiled them, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. Next up we have Paco, Arcane Retriever. This legendary elemental hound costs 3 colorless, a red, and a green mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/3, is partners with Halden, Avid Arcanist, has haste, and whenever Paco, Arcane Retriever attacks, exile the top card of each player's library and put a fetch counter on each of them. Put a +1/+1 counter on Paco for each non-creature card exiled this way. Next up we have Parasitic Impetus. This enchantment aura costs 2 colorless and a black mana to cast, has the following. Enchant creature, enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and is goaded, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, its controller loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Next up we have Trin, Champion of Freedom. This legendary human soldier costs 3 colorless and a white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/3, is partner with Sylvar, Devourer of the Free, and at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Next up we have Sylvar, Devourer of the Free. This legendary cat nightmare costs 3 colorless, a black, and a red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 4/2, is partner with Trin, Champion of Freedom, has menace, and if you sacrifice a human, put a +1/+1 counter on Sylvar, Devourer of the Free. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Next up we have Cartographer's Hawk. Now this bird costs 1 colorless and 1 white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/1, has flying, and when Cartographer's Hawk deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you, return it to its owner's hand. If you do, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. The next creature revealed is Xyrus, the Reaving Storm. This legendary snake leviathan costs 2 colorless, a green, a blue, and a red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/5, has flying, and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token. Whenever Xyrus, the Reaving Storm, deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. The next card revealed is called the Coppercoats. This instant costs 2 colorless and a white mana to cast, has Strive. This spell costs 1 colorless and a white mana more to cast for each target beyond the first, and choose any number of target opponents. Create X1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. Our next card revealed is Soul Ring. Now, this artifact costs 1 colorless mana to cast, and if you tap it, you can add 2 colorless mana. Next up, we have Commander Sphere. Now, this artifact costs 3 mana to cast, but if you tap it, you can add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity, and if you sacrifice Commander Sphere, you can draw a card. The next card revealed is Command Tower. This land, if you tap it, you can add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. The next card revealed is Yannick Scavenging Sentinel. This legendary hyena beast costs 2 colorless, a green, and a white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/3, has partner with Ikoria Lair Scavenger, has vigilance, and when Yannick Scavenging Sentinel enters the battlefield, exile another creature you control until Yannick leaves the battlefield. When you do, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures, where X is the exiled creature's power. Next up, we have Ikoria Lair Scavenger. This legendary human cleric costs 2 colorless and a black mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 2/2, has partner with Yannick Scavenging Sentinel, has menace, and whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Next up, we have Fireflux Squad. This human soldier costs 3 colorless and a red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 4/3, has haste, and whenever Fireflux Squad attacks, you may exile another target attacking creature you control. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Our next card revealed is Lava Brink Floodgates. This artifact costs 3 colorless and a red mana to cast. You can tap it to add 2 red mana, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may put a Doom counter on Lava Brink Floodgates, or remove a Doom counter from it. If it has 3 or more Doom counters on it, sacrifice Lava Brink Floodgates. When you do, it deals 6 damage to each creature. Next up, we have Herald of the Forgotten. This cat beast creature costs 6 colorless and 2 white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 6/6, has flying, and when Herald of the Forgotten enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return any number of target permanent cards with cycling abilities from your graveyard to the battlefield. Hold on, I have to stop the video for a second at this card. Did we just get a card in white that brings stuff from your graveyard to the battlefield? In white. Yes, you do have to cast this card from your hand, but if you do, you can return any number of target permanent cards with cycling abilities from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's any card with cycling. That's lands included, that's anything. So this is powerful. It does cost 8, which I'm glad it does, but this is a pretty powerful card, so keep an eye out for it. Next up, we have Dismantling Wave. This sorcery costs 2 colorless and a white to cast, but for each opponent, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. You could cycle this card for 6 colorless mana and 2 white mana. Next up, we have Fluctuator. This artifact costs 2 colorless mana, and cycling abilities you activate cost up to 2 colorless mana less to activate. Next up, we have Crystalline Resonance. This enchantment costs 2 colorless and a blue mana to cast, and whenever you cycle a card, you may have Crystalline Resonance become a copy of another target permanent until your next turn, except it has this ability. The next card revealed is Eternal Dragon. This dragon spirit costs 5 colorless and 2 white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 5/5, has flying, and if you pay 3 colorless and 2 white mana, you can return Eternal Dragon from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your upkeep, and it has plain cycling for 2. The next card revealed is Astral Drift. Now, this enchantment costs 2 colorless and a white to cast, and whenever you cycle Astral Drift, or cycle another card while Astral Drift is on the battlefield, you may exile target creature. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And cycling, you could pay 2 colorless and a white mana to do so. The next card revealed is the Locust God. Now, this legendary god costs 4 colorless, a blue, and a red mana to cast. It has a power and toughness of 4/4, it has flying, and whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. If you pay 2, a blue and a red, you can draw a card, then discard a card. When the Locust God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. The next card revealed is Twinning Staff. This artifact costs 3 colorless mana to cast. If you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time. You may choose new targets for the additional copy. If you pay 7 and tap it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. The next card revealed is Nissa, Steward of Elements. This legendary planeswalker costs X, green, and blue mana to cast. Its loyalty is X. It has a +2, so you can scry 2. For 0, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card or a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, Steward of Elements, you may put that card onto the battlefield. And for a -6, untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They are still lands. Next up, we have Animist's Awakening. This sorcery costs X and a green mana to cast. Reveal the top X cards of your library. Put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. For Spell Mastery, if there are 2 or more instants and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, untap those lands. Our next card revealed is Dredge the Mire. This sorcery costs 3 colorless and a black mana to cast, and each opponent chooses a creature card in their graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Our next card revealed is Souvenir Snatcher. This bird costs 4 colorless and a blue mana to cast, or you can mutate it for 5 colorless and a blue mana. It has a power and toughness of 4/4, has flying, and when this creature mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact. Our next creature revealed is Ikoria. Now, this beast costs 2 colorless, a black and a green mana to cast, or you can mutate it for 2 colorless and a 2 hybrid black-green mana. And when Ikoria mutates, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. Next up, we have Migratory Greathorn. This creature beast costs 3 colorless and a green mana to cast, or you can mutate it for 2 colorless and a green mana. And whenever this creature mutates, search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. Our next card revealed is Ominous Seas. This card costs 1 colorless and a blue mana to cast. It's an enchantment, and whenever you draw a card, put an Omen counter on Ominous Seas. Remove 8 Omen counters, you can create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token, and it has cycling for 2. The next card revealed is Rooting Molosh. Now this lizard costs 4 colorless and a red mana to cast, and when Rooting Molosh enters the battlefield, exile a target card with cycling ability from your graveyard. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Also, it has cycling for 2. The next card revealed is Wartime Broker. This human warrior costs 3 colorless and a red mana to cast, and whenever 1 or more creatures attack an opponent or planeswalker an opponent controls, those creatures gain menace until end of turn. The next card revealed is Heavenly Whale. This elemental whale costs 4 colorless and 2 blue mana to cast. It has Delve, it has flying, and whenever Heavenly Whale attacks, you may put an instant or sorcery card exiled by Heavenly Whale into your hand. It also has power and toughness of 3/3. The next card revealed is Path of Ancestry. Now this land enters the battlefield tapped, and if you tap it, you can add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. When that mana is spent to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with your commander, you can scry 1. The next card revealed is Binding Ornament. This artifact costs 3 to cast. If you tap it, you can add 1 mana of any color, and if you pay 4 and tap it, each player who controls a card named Binding Ornament draws a card. The next card revealed is Titan Hunter. Now this human warrior costs 4 colorless and a black mana to cast. It has a power and toughness of 4/5. Has at the beginning of each player's end step, if no creatures died this turn, Titan Hunter deals 4 damage to that player, and if you pay 1 in the black, sacrifice a creature, you gain 4 life. The next card revealed is Lava Brink Adventurer. You can pay 2 colorless and a white to cast this creature, Human Soldier. When Lava Brink Adventurer enters the battlefield, choose odd or even. 0 is even, and Lava Brink Adventurer has protection from the chosen converted mana costs. Also, this creature has a power and toughness of 3/3. Our next card revealed is Fang Breaker. Now this beast costs 4 colorless and 2 green mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 6/6. You can mutate it for 3 colorless and a green mana, and whenever this creature mutates, destroy target non-creature permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast token. The next creature revealed is Spellfire Phoenix. This creature, Phoenix, costs 3 colorless and 2 red mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 4/2, has flying, And when Spellfire Phoenix enters the battlefield, you may return an instant or sorcery card with cycling from your graveyard to your hand. At the beginning of each end step, if you have cycled at least 2 cards this turn, return Spellfire Phoenix from your graveyard to your hand. The next card revealed is Deadly Trick. Now this instant costs 3 colorless and a black mana to cast. If you control a commander, you may cast this card without paying its mana cost, and you can exile target creature. The next creature revealed is Akeem the Soaring Wind. Now this legendary bird dinosaur costs 2 colorless, a blue, red, and white mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/4, has flying, and whenever you create 1 or more creature tokens for the first time each turn, create a 1/1 white-blue creature token with flying, and if you pay 3 blue, red, and white creature tokens you control, gain double strike until end of turn. And finally, we have Barracuda of the Tide. Now, this fish creature costs 3 colorless and a blue mana to cast, has a power and toughness of 3/4. Any player may cast spells as though they had flash, and your opponents cannot cast spells during your turn. Now, that was your Magic the Gathering News Report, spoiler edition, here on MTG Anarchy for April 3rd, 4th, and 5th of 2020. Before you go, I would appreciate it if you liked and shared this video, as we do want this video to get out into the algorithm so more people can go ahead and see it and know what the cards are that were spoiled over these days. Also, I would appreciate it if you subscribed and hit the bell notification to keep up to date with any new videos that do come out here on MTG Anarchy. And finally, I would appreciate it as well if you went and supported not only small creators, but those LGSs out there that are in need, as long as you're financially stable, because we are one community, so we should support them as such. But again, thank you so much for watching this Magic the Gathering News Report, spoiler edition for Ikoria Lair of Behemoths for April 3rd, 4th, and 5th of 2020. Again, this is Michael from MTG Anarchy. Thanks again for watching. Have a fantastic day.